So what was your team's reasoning for selecting the PE model? What did you choose and why? So it's going to be one of four. It's either CMA, CEA, CBA, or CUA.
CMA.
Okay, and why? Because that's the piece that everyone wants to know, so that if I give a question that's similar to this, what was the thought process for figuring out why that one and not the others?
It's because they're trying to compare two things.
Okay, well, all four models compare two things. As you know, pharmacoeconomics always compares two treatments, at least two treatments.
They compare the cost between the different alternatives.
Okay, and they all have costs in them. Is there something special about the costs?
Minimizing costs.
Pardon me?
Cost minimization.
Okay, but why cost minimization? Because all four models compare two treatments. All four models have costs in them.
I think when you compare two products, normally when it comes to like healthcare, our objective is to get the best care, but we also have to look at the cost. We have to minimize the cost and go the care that will give us the best outcome in terms of health.
Okay, now cost effectiveness does that too. And really all four of them are looking at the value, the cost per value. So it's still not, we're still not driving into, and this is what's good about this. This is what I'm hoping to get from this conversation, so that we can explicitly say what it is that we're looking for, because we're kind of putting on our CSI hats. What are the clues in the abstract that tell us that it's CMA and not CEA, CBA, or CUA? You know, in some ways you can use a process of elimination. So team one, why CMA and not the other three? What's different about CMA that matches with the abstract? Yeah. So yeah, we're really hitting into what is it? What can you see in that abstract that would say you should use CMA? Because I can give you another abstract that will be CBA. I want you to be able to know the difference. What clues to look at? So am I getting crickets?
Is it because they're comparing cost difference between biosimilar medication?
Well, actually, all CEA does that too. CEA, actually, all four models have cost as the numerator, and the denominator is different. And that's a clue as to what to look at to find the difference. So team one, what's the, okay, you pick CMA, so let's look at the other ones. So CEA, what's the outcome? And you're online, you can go and look at one of the tables or the slides. What's the outcome that is being measured on CEA? You can go to slide 4. I mean to the slides for 4. In fact, I just made a single slide deck for 4A and 4B and put them together. But there is a chart that shows A and B together. Okay. Someone want to say it out loud? Because someone text me with the right answer.
Oh, natural units for CEA. So if you're like looking at the examples you have with blood pressure, blood glucose, or
Yeah. So natural units, I don't like that word, but natural units are things you're going to run into. You're going to see blood pressure, laboratory values. And do you see laboratory values in here? Blood pressure. They talk about INR ratio, looks like the outcome, but they don't actually give it. They're not doing their analysis based on the degree of the INR. So it doesn't look like it's CEA. What about CBA? What's the, so we know the numerator is, because you always think about all these things as a ratio. We know the numerator is in money. What's the denominator for CBA? Go ahead and look at that slide in
Money?
the, pardon me?
Is it also looking at money, the dollars that are being spent?
It's the money. And what's different in here is the numerator is the cost of the treatment. The denominator is, instead of saying, like, let's say a blood pressure reading like CEA, it'd be what's the dollar value of that. So let's say it's the outcome is to have diabetes or not diabetes. Well, there's a cost associated with having diabetes. Or let's say let's get a maybe a little more concrete example. Let's say the treatment, the outcome of the treatment is to have an amputation or not. So instead of having the denominator for CBA being, let's say, number of amputations or number of amputations avoided, it is what's the dollar value of having your big toe, which is really not that uncommon in diabetics, having your big toe chopped off. So there's the cost of, it's not just the cost of the amputation and the physical rehabilitation to learn how to walk again, buying different kind of shoes, but now there's certain jobs that you really can't have. It changes your economic outlook. So it has a value approach to it. So that's the CBA. You can think of it as numerator is the cost of the treatment. The denominator, instead of being natural units like CEA, is now going to be what's the monetary value of that outcome. Then CUA, the numerator is dollars, the cost of the treatments, the two treatments, but the U is utility, so it's going to be like a quality. What's that quality of life measurement that we've made for? That's the outcome for treatment A and treatment B. So we get what's the cost for the patient to be better off, A and for B, and we compare the two. So the outcome for that is, what's the outcome for CMA then? What's the outcome of a CMA?
Is it looking at like the efficacy and safety of the drug, or like how it's the cost affecting the? I guess if it's what costs less or what costs more. No.
Okay. So thanks, Karen. So here's a clue that makes it hard to think of and why I use this one a lot. It makes an assumption, doesn't it? So look at that graph, that chart that I have in the 4 slides. You see that blue chart that you're given? Let me go bring it up so I can walk you through it. Can everyone hear that? Do you hear someone else besides me talking?
Yes.
Okay, let me go and turn that off. That's my other seminar that I'm going to join as soon as I'm finished with you guys. There, I got them on mute. So I'm looking at the slide for 4A. Actually, I combined 4A and 4B, and it's using a graph that comes out of your management book. And it says the outcome measure that is assumed to be in equivalent and comparable groups. It means there is no denominator. That if you take, so if you remember my example saying that if I'm comparing like a generic ibuprofen with one formulation to another generic ibuprofen with a slightly different formulation, but the active ingredient's the same, the safety profile is the same, it really comes down to that denominator is just equal. There is no difference. So we are just looking at price. So that's what makes a CMA. That's what makes a CMA. So that's how you can kind of go through it. And I'm going to give very few CMAs, but I use this particular one to make a point because it shows you how to compare and contrast between all the others. Because now it's like CSI, and I don't know if you guys, I don't watch that TV show, but it's a neat premise where you're looking at clues, science clues. And this here is the same, that you're looking at the clues that tell you, because that's what you're going to run in real life. So it is CMA. But now I want to ask the question of Team 2. So figure out who you want to speak for Team 2. But the authors do justify why CMA. Now you'll notice no one in here says CMA, and I'll tell you that in a lot of literature out there, they may say if they say what the type of study is, they may be wrong about it. And second is often they don't say, they say, well, if you're reading this, you should be able to, it's so apparent. You should be able to do it. That's why I emphasize about looking at these clues, because you're going to get pharmacoeconomic papers, and it's not going to explicitly tell you what type of study it is. That's really, really common. So Team 2, the authors in the abstract do give a rationale. They don't say, we used CMA analysis technique because of this, but they mention what the because is. So Team 2, how did the authors report their rationale for using CMA without even mentioning CMA? It's in there. So you begin giving a clue. So look at that. That abstract if you don't know already. What was it that they said? What did they report that would give evidence of being able to use CMA, a justification? So Team 2, anybody want to speak for Team 2? I've got crickets. So Team 2, what do you think? Do you guys need to go back out to the breakout rooms for a little bit? Which is fine with me. Justin, are you trying to get my attention? Okay. Anybody from Team 2 want to talk? Okay. Seems we're really, really stuck. No one from Team 2 wants to speak. Brooke, Nah, Richard, Pottermore Joint, and so as I butcher people's names. Do you guys want to meet up tomorrow and go through this? Okay, but no one from Team 2 is speaking to me or to the class.
Hi, Dr. Douglas.
Hi there. Are you the brave one?
Yes, I was trying to figure out reading again and again. So,
Okay. But in Team 2, when you guys were together and talking, did anybody find something they could quote out of the abstract to say why the authors justified the method that they used? Or you guys came up with nothing?
no, actually we didn't. Yeah, actually we didn't pay attention to this, like this particular something that's.
Okay.
I can get back to you by discussing it again.
Okay, I think that'll be good. Let's try one more. If not, we'll shut down and we'll get back together tomorrow or Monday or a week from today. But I think going through this is going to tell everyone how to look at these questions better than a lecture. What about Team 3? Any ideas on the study perspective? What's your idea on the study perspective?
So we said that it was the payer study perspective for the third-party plan.
Okay. And what was the big clue that gave you that?
Within their methods, they said that the cost of the health plan for hospitalized patients discharged in 2006. So looking at the payer study perspective, they're looking at the total cost of the care of the patient that the healthcare plan will pay. So that's why we went with that.
Okay. And the very last phrase of the very last sentence, which resulted in overall savings to health plan X.
Yes.
Yeah, they actually said it there. Okay, so 3's done. Thank you. Team 4. What were the results from the study?
We said the PE model for the application 2 is CEA, cost-effective analysis.
Well, we just went over what it was, but the question number 4. I'm sorry. Let me.
Because you asked us to do the PE model
for Team 2.
2.
I'm sorry, I was on the other. I was still on the old. Let me get up and get the. I was still looking at the old abstract 1. So let me get back to my place here and get to. Abstract 2. Okay, so Team 4, what was your reason for selecting the PE model in the study? So you can tell me what PE model you thought it was and what was your rationale behind it.
Yeah, so the PE model we chose was a cost-effective analysis. And if you look at the abstract, it says they compare the cost and they showed that the medication or whatever they were studying was less costly and more effective. And we scrolled down through the study and there was this quadrant where they compare the cost and effectiveness. Page number 5.
Okay. And this was the effectiveness of what? Was it clinical outcomes or something else that they treat? Okay, but they said it. So those were the clues that you looked at. Okay,
Yes.
but just an FYI, for a CBA and a CU, more for a CUA, I can do a similar type of a chart, and that instead of still having more than or less than cost, but instead of greater or less than effectiveness, I could have it greater or less than quality of life for the patient. So be aware of that. But it is a CEA. Now, a CEA, you can think as the numerator as the cost of the treatments, but the denominator is the outcome, like the natural units. So what was the outcome in this particular study?
The outcome.
So what I'm driving at that is looking at the outcomes is a really big clue. And that's what's different between all four models is the outcome, where CMA is the one that's the hardest to remember because it really doesn't have an outcome per se. It assumes that they're equivalent, which is what we found in the case study 1, that first abstract. But CEA has some type of like clinical kind of outcome, natural units. CBA, the outcome was dollars, and the dollars was representing the value of a disease state or the value of that treatment. And CUA, the outcome was some type of quality of life, usually a quality, but it could have been a disability, but some type of quality of life was the outcome. So what's the outcome in this one?
Adherence?
Yes. And what I like about this is that in many ways, if you said is adherence an outcome, like, well, it's not a clinical outcome that I think of. It's not like a natural units, but think of it as like an outcome of the behavior of the patient. So you can go ahead and treat it like a regular clinical outcome and use CEA. So what this example does, it kind of expands your idea of what is an actual outcome. Because and we'll say in the real world, the outcomes isn't just millimeters of mercury or percentage of A1C, that you can expand on that because it is an important item with the patient. So you can use this model, even though it's not a traditional outcome a clinical outcome as we would know and think of it. Okay, very good. Very good. That's exactly it. So now let's go to team 5. How did the authors report their rationale for using that specific PE method? What did the authors say? Or what assumption can you make from the authors?
We said that basically because they're providing a service and they're not just looking at expense or savings, they're actually looking at adherence. They're looking at basically the value of their service. And that's basically how we think that they justified using that.
Okay, so Rafi, I'm going to change the wording a little bit. All four models have cost in there. What's the cost of the treatment versus not? But so I'm just changing the language a little bit because I think your guys' thought process is pretty much right on. Then the outcome of this treatment was adherence, and that you can treat it as as like a natural unit clinical outcome. And the authors did not really specifically say that. They just did it. So you did good. You did good. Thank you. Thanks, Team 5. Team 6. What was the study perspective and what your reasoning for picking that study perspective?
We chose the provider and the patient.
Okay, it could only be one.
Okay. We chose the provider because they were the one doing the intervention and the cost to the institution because of the intervention.
Okay, so cost is a really big clue. So if I'm looking at, if I'm doing a study, let's say of a hospital, and I just collect the cost that the hospital bears, then it's in the perspective of the hospital. If I only look at, let's say, patients who come in and pick up a prescription, and I just only collect the costs that are reimbursed by the health insurance company, then it's the health insurance company's perspective. But if I only pick up the copay that's paid by the patient, then it's definitely the patient's perspective, but it can't be both at the same time. You could do both. It just muddies up the, it doesn't tell you much because you just need to be able to have the cost. So the cost is a big clue. It's whose cost. Now, who is the payer? They actually say it. So take a quick look at it, Team 6.
Is it the UK NHS?
You've got it. Okay, UK NHS stands for United Kingdom National Health Service. So you will get a lot of really good pharmacoeconomic studies. In fact, a lot of really good clinical studies come from Europe because they have most countries have a unified healthcare system. So every patient has a medical record that follows them. And the NHS is very similar to, they're like a combination between the American VA system and Kaiser. They're not exactly the same as either two, but it is, you go to a VA hospital, you go to a VA clinic, you get your drugs filled, you got the sense, and your insurance is really through the VA, and very similar to Kaiser, Intermountain Health, Geisner, the other fully staffed HMOs. So yes. Okay, good. Thank you. And who's next? I'm switching between. So Team 7, what were the study results?
So we determined that the intervention was less costly and more effective. The intervention group showed more adherence or less non-adherence. And then the ICR, this group actually saved money for each extra adherent patient by like 2,000 pounds.
Yeah. I don't know what the exchange rate is right now because with Brexit, it's plummeted. It's back to 1970, 80 values, but there's more dollars than to the pound. So only CEA, you really, when you interpret it, that's why the grid really works for CEA, is those 4 different values. If you think of it, when you look at the case I gave you, and I said A, B, C, or D, lower cost, less effective, and all the permutations of it, you can look at that and says, that's just that grid. That's just that grid. And your analysis is going to be just that. Now, CUA can have the same thing. You just change the dependent variables axis instead of the effectiveness. It's of the effectiveness in terms of, like, let's say blood pressure. It's the effectiveness in terms of quality of life. So there's another clue to look at. Cool. Very good. Thanks, Team 7. Team 8. So your rationale, who could you generalize this? So you're reading this study because maybe you're interested in to do something very similar. Can you generalize these results to, let's say, a patient population in the Central Valley? Okay, so team 8, you had the question, your rationalization for generalization of the study results. And if you haven't been introduced, generalization and external validity are essentially the same things. Could you read this paper and apply it to another patient population? Any patient population?
We think yes.
Okay, why?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so that's the part I'm really driving at. And we may have to get back to you. It's just what is it about the intervention and that could be duplicated, and could that patient population and their access to healthcare, is that the same? So think about it. So think about it. It's just, and it's not like having advanced degrees. If I'm reading a study from another country, are their patients really that different? Okay, they're Northern European, but they're still Homo sapien. So there'll be some difference in drugs that would be different. It is a bit of a different culture. I don't know if that's big enough. So we kind of walk through that kind of thing think about the patient population and their access to healthcare, and then the intervention. Who's doing the intervention? And can that be duplicated here too? So what are the similarities and dissimilarities, and are the similarities enough that you could say yes? Then it really drives a question of let's say, I'll give you this example. This is for the whole class, and this is a clinic, thinking of a clinical study. So I've got let's say a treatment for type 2 diabetes, and I get this treatment program has really good outcomes, and I am doing the study in, let's pick France with universal healthcare. If it could even be Germany. And we'll pick Germany because Germany is more like the US. Some things are similar, but we don't have universal healthcare, and Germany does. So we have Germany. So yes, any type of drug is going to work better, or let's say higher probability of working well with Americans of Northern European descent, because there are some drugs that have worked well in the United States, but now that they've been implemented in South Asia, they're not working as well, because it's for this particular drug, it just happens to be that the population has a difference in it that affects the drug's effectiveness, efficacy. So you can't guarantee it. So look at the patient population and then the healthcare system that's implementing it. So, so now that I've said that on some clues, what would you pick about your rationalization? Do you think that the healthcare, the patient population is similar enough that, okay, it's Northern European, but we have a lot of Northern Europeans in the Central Valley. It probably would be okay. Is that what you're thinking? For this particular program, the adherence program.
Yeah.
Okay. There may have to be some changes for culture and language.
for sure.
But it's still just like, if you were to summarize it, it's a high touch program. It's trying to just reach out and remind people. Kind of like that?
Yes.
Okay. What about the healthcare system? What's similar and dissimilar between the UK's National Health Service and then the average person with insurance and without insurance in the Central Valley? Are they similar? Or are they pretty dissimilar?
I believe they're dissimilar because with the UK systems, they are like a national healthcare, while the US we have more like a private and also government help. So where there might be less of uninsured to pay for this service, but with the UK, they have the national health, so the advisor or the pharmacist will get paid for the service.
Yes. And so the key thing to think about here is universal healthcare. So Germany has a bunch of different health insurance plans, almost like the United States, except for everyone can join at least one of them because they have universal healthcare. Same with France. France is kind of a mix between the UK and the German system. Although they never want to say that. They want to say it's theirs and native. So my answer is because but you looked at the rationale. Those are the things that you want to look at. How could you take a plan from in one setting and put it in another setting? So for me, my answer is no, but for exactly the same reasons. That the patient population is different enough, but that can be overcome. Making cultural changes and language changes. It's still basically a high touch. But in the UK, you can walk to any pharmacy and get your medication. Whereas in the US, everyone's got a different kind of program. And so my opinion, I'd be doubtful that we would see the same results. So one way of putting this is if we were to implement it, a similar high-touch adherence program in the United States, that we would expect the results of the test to overestimate what we would actually get, that we would not, which is the kind of like proper way of saying we would not be as successful. Not be as successful. And that's my personal opinion about it, or I should say my professional opinion. But as long as you're looking at that rationale, maybe because I'm just more jaded, that's the things that you want to look at. Can you really run that same thing here with, are the patients similar enough? So if it was a adherence program, but for specific type of a drug that maybe doesn't really cross into different countries that well, maybe that'd be something you'd look at. But this was any type of a drug. Let me tell you, let me take this opportunity to tell you about what CVS has done about adherence. So this is only patients who have CVS Health, the Caremark, the PBM. So CVS took that data and worked with Harvard and Penn State. And they actually got to the point of doing a high touch kind of system like this, but they actually tested it with different scripts. So the pharmacist was given their list. They called these specific patients. They followed this script. So they were able to study to see which script was actually more effective. Still another high touch program. So they were able to now say, okay, for patients who have PBM, or the Caremark PBM in particular, but it means then that this is a patient population that has health insurance. So if I was to take the script that won out, the one that was most effective, this way of talking to patients to motivate them to be adherent, I could apply it to any other, take that script, apply it to any other patient population, but as long as that population also had health insurance, it'd probably be a lot more successful than if I did it with just general population that has maybe 15% of Americans don't have health insurance. And that's probably higher here in the Central Valley. Although I haven't looked at any data in the past few years because the implementation of the ACA, Obamacare, has been spotty across the nation. And this was when I was in Texas, and Texas never adopted it. Okay. So now you got the reasoning. So let's move on to Team 10. And what's your reasoning for the study perspective you selected? So what was the study perspective for the... Did I lose my place here? Who did I just talk to? Generalization, that was Team 8, right?
Yes.
So okay, so I jumped in. So it's Team 9, you're up next. So what was the PE model that you chose and why?
We chose mostly CEA, but we also chose that it was CUA. CEA is, I think, the most obvious one because that's the design of the study itself. It's in the title. It's most of the data that they collected. But we also picked CUA because they did look at utility values for patients as well as, I think it was response to pharmacist care.
Yeah. So could you have both those reported in the same paper?
I don't see why not.
And me either. And what I like about this is the way that pharmacoeconomics is presented in the books is you think that you can only do one at a time. And then you hear me say, well, you don't want to mix up the dollars. You want to make sure that the perspective is the same. But on here, the perspective would be the same from both. And you're collecting the dollars. You might as well collect both the clinical outcome as well as quality of life. Yeah, you got it. It's CEA and CUA. So the lesson here is you can actually have more than one reported in the same. Now, these authors could have, if they really wanted to, they could have published two separate papers. But this happens to be, is this a Kaiser? Yeah, it's Kaiser. So remember me talking about that Kaiser and the VA and other, fully staffed HMOs is the term. It's the, you get everything from that one institution. They have an incentive to make sure that they look at CUA as well as CEA, because a CUA is, in the end, what are you really trying to find out? So yeah, you reduce someone's blood pressure, but are they actually better off? And so it just happens in our fractured healthcare system that most of the time the CUA question isn't meaningful if you're only doing a part of the care. But if you have responsibility for total care, like the VA, like Kaiser, and similar institutions, you definitely want to know both, because you now want to make sure not only did you reduce like someone's blood pressure, but they're actually living better lives. Because isn't it ultimately what the objective of any type of medical therapy is? That the patient lives a better life. So what's amazing is between the CEA, CMA, and CBA, they don't do any of that. We just assume if we reduce the blood pressure or stabilize the hemoglobin A1C, that the patients are going to live better lives. Yeah, that's true. But are we actually measuring by how much? We want to know that because there may be two CEA type of two treatments that reduce blood pressure and hemoglobin, and they may be close to each other, but one may actually make patients' lives better off. Until you measure it, you don't know. So let me get off my soapbox and say, really good. Happens to be both. You looked at the clues, you saw what the outcomes were, and you got it. Okay. So I'm switching between the list. So that was team 9. So now team 10, what was the study perspective? What would you call it?
We said it was a provider because the control group was like providing primary care provider to the patients and management of type 2 diabetes versus the enhanced care group had pharmacy intervention.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what we chose.
Okay, I'll put a slightly different thing on it. I wouldn't say that it's provider. I'd go more that it was the institution. We're thinking in terms as the institution for all the same reasons that you just said. Quite frankly, there's actually very few studies where it's just a provider. Because it's usually the implementation is it's from like the health insurance company or the institution, and it's not different between one provider to the other provider within an institution. So it's all the same reasons, but I would pick institution as being the right answer, as being the best answer here. But yeah, you can look at it as being the different providers, and that the two treatment groups had different providers. But it's the institution that has both the physicians and the pharmacists. So they're the ones who would use the results of the study more than if they were two separate groups. Okay, good job. Good job of looking at the clues. I would have come up with just a different answer for a slightly different reason, that the real people who are reading this, who are making the decisions, is at the institutional level. So I'm thinking this is Kaiser. Okay, cool. That was 10. What about team 11? This can be hard. This was not a pharmacoeconomic per se, but there were two main, we'll call them two outcomes. So we know the study was both a CEA and a CUA. So one's going to be kind of like a clinical type of outcome, and another one's going to be a utility type of outcome.
We thought it was CVD risks and cost-effective interventions.
Well, you got one right. The other one is way off. So it was the estimated 10-year CVD risk for both groups, and they happened to use the UK Prospective Diabetes Study Risk Engine version 2, but you got the CVD risk. So thinking in terms that the other outcome, the quality outcome, that was the other outcome. It's a utility measure of the health state. So that was the outcome. So that's why that they showed you the outcomes in terms of qualities. The quality is the outcome. Make sense? Anybody want me to repeat that or go over it again? So I'm just getting crickets. If someone says, no, we got it, I can move on.
That makes sense.
Okay. This is the only question I've had about what was the study horizon. So it's thinking, what is a study horizon? And if you're off on the definition, it'd be easy to miss it, but they actually say it, but they don't say the study horizon is this. And this was team 12.
We said 4 to 5 years for this question. When looking at the study, it said the enhanced care group had a higher chance of being considered a cost-effective strategy if you used a longer time horizon of a minimum of 4 to 5 years.
You got it. Exactly there. Exactly there. Good job. Good job. Okay, guys, your morning's almost done. Ooh, 9:59. Are you guys supposed to be in another class by now?
Not yet.
Not yet. And Dr. Tavahari hasn't logged on as far as I can see. So let me ask Team 13. What was the most important result of case study number 3?
So what we got was that overall it helps with long-term CVD risk reductions.
Yes. And
for less cost.
Okay,
So
really
it's also
good.
cost effective.
I also would have taken this. It gives pharmacists a job and a rationale for them working. Yeah.
That's a good one. Okay.
That's a good one too. I would have accepted either one of them. Well, both are true. There's a number of things in here, and both are really true. So I'm saying my time is up. So tomorrow, is it okay? Is anybody going to miss me tomorrow afternoon? No one's going to miss me tomorrow afternoon. I figured there'd be no problem in giving the afternoon off.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. And have a good time in ethics, and I will catch up with you guys later. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think I will end the meeting. If I end the meeting, I kick it off. I'm going to see about if I can exit out without.
Good morning, Charles. Can you just
Good morning.
meeting?
There, so
the meeting, and I'll just be here.
Okay.
We have black exam too, so take your time. No worries. I'm just here to students have questions. That's
So
all.
I'm going
We don't have a class.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can exit out without killing the meeting. So if everyone disappears, it's because I couldn't find the difference. Okay, see you later, Dr. Vari. Okay, I can just leave the meeting.
Thank you.